Research has made it known that about 92% of people who set goals eventually never achieve those goals. And that is simply because of one thing. Anytime that we set goals for ourselves, there is always that inner feeling or that inner voice that tells us otherwise, that you're not competent enough, you're not strong enough, or you do not have the requisite skills and the abilities to attain those goals. And that is why in today's video, we'll be looking at one psychological effect known as the imposter syndrome and how you can actually go on to build your self-confidence and steer yourself towards the attainment of whatever financial goal that you set for yourself. And so if you're new here, my name is Nana. I hold a master's degree in business finance, and on this channel, we discuss everything personal finance and personal development. For the avoidance of doubt, imposter syndrome is simply that nagging feeling that makes us feel less able or capable of hitting our goals or going on to do anything likely to steer us towards the attainment of those goals. And so Dr. Valerie Young is a scientist, and she went on to discover that about 70% of people at some point in their life feel like imposters, and that at some point in life, it might be in the family, probably even at the workplace, we feel like we are not capable or we are not competent enough to get things done. And that is what actually led her to come up with the 5 competence types or the personalities that eventually fuel that self-doubt and then subsequently stops us from attaining our goals. And this leads us to the competence types and the personalities that eventually actually fuels that self-doubt that we have or we feel at some point in life. And so the first thing that she talks about is a perfectionist. She believes that one of the reasons why people do not attain their goals or they're actually faced with self-doubt is simply because they wait to get everything perfect before going out to start or deliver in accordance with any goal that is set for themselves. Secondly, she believes that one of the key personalities that actually fuels self-doubt or increases imposter syndrome is a soloist. And that is simply a personality where you feel like you've got to achieve everything or do everything on your own. In that at some point in life, we feel like we don't need people. We don't need anyone's contributions. We don't need their experiences or anything that they're likely going to do to help us to attain our goals. And that also fuels imposter syndrome. This brings us to the third competence type or the personality that fuels imposter syndrome, and that is the Superman or the Superwoman personality. She believes that that is a personality that believes that you've got to excel in everything that you do. But sometimes it is okay for you to actually see some failure along the line, because failure is not the end of everything that you're looking to actually achieve in life, but rather a mere condition for you to try something new or for you to build upon the knowledge that you've gained through failure and then subsequently steer yourself towards the attainment of your goals. This brings us to the most vital part of the video, and that is how does imposter syndrome or self-doubt affect our finances. So the first thing that we need to consider is that it leads us to undervalue our skills, and that is one of the key reasons why people do not see any progress at their workplace or probably even in their businesses. According to the same research, about 60% of all women and then 48% of all men who are business owners actually underprice their product simply because of imposter syndrome, in that they do not believe that their products are worth that price that they are charging for. And that actually leads to one thing, that is lower profits or lower revenue, and then subsequently their businesses eventually die off. And this also happens in our individual lives, in that sometimes we feel like we do not have the requisite skills to even save or probably even to invest. There are people out there who believe that investment is probably for the rich, or they have to have huge sums of money before they start investing. As opposed to this, investment is a vehicle that will take you towards the attainment of your financial goals. And that if you're pursuing financial freedom, investment is one of the tools that you need to deploy in order to get there. Also, savings is one of the tools as well that would eventually ensure that you hit your goals. And so as opposed to having to think that you need huge sums of money to actually start investing or start saving, you have to actually develop that skills and then eventually see yourself towards the attainment and the pursuit of that goal that you set for yourself to achieve in life. This brings us to the second point, and that is you procrastinate on opportunities. So perfectionism is one of the key reasons why people do not eventually get started, and that is they sit down and they are left in an analysis paralysis state where they want to get everything perfect or everything figured out before they start. That is one of the reasons why people are not able to catch on to opportunities or to take advantage of opportunities altogether. If you really want to go on and earn more and to develop your ability to build wealth and to sustain yourself more importantly, there's one thing that you need to know. You need to get over the imposter syndrome, get started, and then perfect things over time. Because the more and more you wait for validation, the more likely your goals are going to be held back, in that you wouldn't even find a reason or the right motivation to go on to actually execute. And that is one of the main reasons why people are left broke and they are left poor at the end of the day. This brings us to the third point, and that is you avoid taking risk. Now, risk aversion is one of the reasons why people do not eventually build wealth and they do not become rich at the end of the day, simply because risk to a larger extent is positively correlated, holding all other factors constant, to riches or wealth building. If you were to take all the rich people out there, all the multi-millionaires and the billionaires, they go on to take risk, and their risk aversion is minimized in that they consult experts to limit their exposure to all these risks and then mitigate the risk altogether. And that is one of the things that you need to know. Imposter syndrome would actually make you think that you do not have the competence, or you're not even able to get started, let alone to go on and become successful. And so one of the key things that you need to know is that you need to get in the right frame of mind and then get over your risk aversion, which is more importantly fueled by imposter syndrome, and then try as much as possible to try new things, take on those risks, but make sure that you actually take on mitigated or calculated risk, so that at the end of the day, you do not end up blowing everything or the progress that you've made financially along the line. This brings us to the fourth point and the last one, and that is you self-sabotage your own success and then settle for less. So according to the research, about 30% of all employees turn down promotions simply because they feel like they are not competent enough to handle the responsibilities or the job requirements of those managerial positions or the higher ranks that they would have otherwise assumed, had it not been for the fact that they are kept in a state of imposter syndrome. And so what you need to know is that imposter syndrome would actually hinder any progress. Even in your marriage, there's sometimes opportunities that may come your way that you and your spouse can take advantage of. And imposter syndrome can actually limit you in that it makes you believe against all odds that you're not able and you wouldn't subsequently become successful if you were to take on those opportunities. And that is why it will lead you to one thing, and that is failure. This brings us to the last part of the video, and that is how can we actually beat imposter syndrome and self-doubt. So the first thing that you need to do is to start a proof of worth journal, in that according to cognitive behavioral therapy, anytime that you sit down to write the progress that you've made, it increases your chances of actually going on to attain your goals by up to 40%. So anytime that you get something done, try and then sit down and then write it down. That actually programs your brain to believe that you're capable, you're competent, and then more importantly, it diminishes your self-doubt and then imposter syndrome altogether. This brings us to the second point, and that is to quit the who before how circle. So according to Napoleon Hill, a mastermind alliance is simply a group of people who are like-minded and share the same values coming together to get things done. Anytime that you find yourself in these groups, you increase your self-confidence, and then you're able to beat imposter syndrome and self-doubt, in that the group will drag you along. And so what you have to do, and to simply actually adapt, is to try as much as possible and then find people who are like-minded. If you have the goal of saving or probably starting a company, it is time for you to actually follow people on social media who share knowledge or share their experiences about how they've actually built successful businesses. Or you can even listen to podcasts that also increases your chances of actually beating imposter syndrome altogether and then becoming self-confident, which also increases your chances of actually becoming successful financially. This brings us to the last point, and that is to visualize or to practice the power of imagination. So according to Napoleon Hill, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can actually achieve. So one of the greatest things that you need to do is to see the end right from the beginning. If you're to take all the successful people in life, they actually realize whatever they're actually seeing today several years ago in their minds, simply because that would drive you, and that would add on to diminish the self-doubt and imposter syndrome that you're likely going to face in life. And this is one of the surest ways for you to actually attain your goals. And so I'll link a video also down in the description. If you're battling with procrastination, there are several things that I share in that video which might be helpful. So thank you for spending time with us, and see you in the next video.